Good evening and welcome to the May 8th, 2023 Comprehensive Plan Update Committee meeting.
Well, hello there. It is a small group tonight. It's myself and Doug, and we've got two of our members, Donna and Chuck. So thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. For anybody who is going to be watching this at home or online at some later time, anybody who might hear us in the hallways wandering, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to take a look at the revised draft that the committee reviewed back in March. Do we have our meeting? Took some notes and comments received by the committee, made revisions to the draft document, and we're going to be talking about that updated revised draft this evening. Is that a good summary of where we are?
So I brought March's, that was the most recent draft I had. I see yours is April.
I have the new, yeah.
That was the one that was emailed.
That we're going over tonight.
Would you like me to print one out for you so
I
you can?
didn't print it, yeah, it's too much for me to print.
Yeah, we can send a copy. Can you send a copy to the printer and I'll grab it for you?
Yeah. Do you want one with the full appendix here?
Yeah, we can, whatever one you
If
can.
it's any different, then.
It's
Yeah.
substantially different.
Appendix.
Yeah, the appendix hasn't changed too much. We did update some of the
mapping.
Some of the mapping was updated, and also some of the tables were updated with new information, but nothing drastic
Save the
change.
trees, don't print the appendix.
So just print the body of the.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then I can go run up and grab it when we know it's gone to the printer. So I think what I'll do is just provide sort of an overview of some of the major changes that were made. A couple of points of notation is agriculture was added as its own separate policy area with its own policy statement and strategies, and then corresponding in the implementation section, it has its own table with agricultural related activities to really capture the comments and thoughts that were gathered earlier in the planning process through this committee and through the stakeholder meeting or meetings that were conducted with members of the farming community. So that was one major change. The implementation section was modified to be more in a table form and identified potential partners and timeframes for implementation of the items. And there was a little bit more of an introduction as far as like what the implementation was all about. And then we did add a sort of summary or closing statement so it didn't just abruptly end at the implementation table and go right to an appendices. We reordered some of the documents to make sure that information presented in
Sort of a logical fashion.
yeah. So everything lines
Made
up.
it flow a little bit better.
Right, so that, the order of the policy statements matches the order in the implementation section, and so that everything sort of lines up a little bit better. Also, I would say, made some wordsmithing changes, not really changing, I think, the substance of the direction of the plan, but more, sentence structure or better or different words. So there's quite a few of those changes made as well. We still haven't put in the last step is going to be putting those page numbers in. We just wanted to make sure we weren't going to significantly impact pagination. At this point, the plan is the staff is preparing to present the draft. The town board members are eager to see the draft document, so we're looking at presenting the draft next week at their work session meeting. And so we'll go from there. So I think, Doug, I don't know if the best way to go about this is, maybe I'll just ask the question, was everybody okay with the formatting change? And I'm going to go grab that. Do we think that copy's up there?
That, yeah.
Okay. I'll have Doug continue the conversation, but was everybody comfortable with the addition of agriculture as its own standalone? And I think there were a couple of other minor wording changes to those policy titles, just to not repeat certain words over and over again. So I think we should talk about that as well, and make sure that nothing was lost or there's no issue with the titles of each of those policy areas.
Yeah, and the organization of the order in which they're listed. we didn't want it to come off as one being more important than the other, but we
Yeah.
think that running it from the way that we did allows the document to flow a little bit better.
Yeah, I think the order is, I mean, I think the order is fine. I don't think the order, you know, it helped, I think, especially moving the transportation piece. A quick note, just nothing substantive while Carrie is gone, but there on the table of contents page, there is no Appendix D or E listed, but there are appendices D and E. So
Okay, I'll make that.
that ought to be put in. And at least the way it printed out on my copy, so it will presumably show this way, D and E were flipped.
Okay.
So D and E were flipped, and they're not represented on that page at all. So there's that.
I'm just going to take notes in the document for us to make any necessary changes.
All right. Let me know when you're done there.
Nope, you're all good.
Okay. And then I wanted to just confirm that for future land use, that there's nothing in the implementation section because that future land use is sort of self-contained. Is that
Yes, yeah.
correct?
So we made it its sort of its own section, and we updated the language. We're now calling it like the future zoning recommendations, since a lot of what comes out of it is recommendations for zoning changes, more than just broad land use categories. But yeah, we set that up as a separate section.
right? Yeah, I know, but I just mean, you know, no one should be looking for an implementation
Yes.
page
Yes.
following that. Okay. That's fine. Okay.
So I think, can I ask a question? So I know that for the agricultural section, I think we would want to spend a few minutes with that particular section since it's new. I think what we did was we took some of recommendations that had been living in other sections, other policy areas, and moved them into the agricultural section if that made the most sense. And then, but also added additional information based on the feedback we heard at the last committee meeting, the written comments that were received, and then just going back to the planning department's notes and notations and earlier drafts of things. That's sort of what was the source of the information contained in this section. Are there any missing strategies, things that we've completely forgotten something, or do we think that we've at least adequately addressed agricultural opportunities?
I think to suggest maybe we just go chapter by chapter and
Oh,
start at the
okay.
beginning,
we can do that.
because
We can
It
definitely-
seems like we're jumping all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
no,
right,
we could do that.
that's fair.
It'd be kind
That's
of a long
fair.
evening.
I wasn't sure if, because that was the only
Yeah.
new one,
Yeah.
but no, that's a good idea. So the executive summary is really sort of a overview of so if anybody didn't want to read all 60 or 70 pages of the plan, they could read the executive summary and sort of get a sort of an idea of what the plan identifies, if that makes sense. So it's not meant to be a complete catch-all, it's meant to be more of a snapshot of what the plan is intending and outlining.
Okay.
And then the introduction is the introduction, sort of the plan, purpose, and intent, the legal basis for comprehensive plans, the planning horizon discussion, and then sort of the guiding principles that, that sort of the 2023 comprehensive plan update was, sort of striving to achieve.
Building upon what was previously identified, the 2010 plan, these were three areas that we looked at
Right.
that hadn't been adequately addressed previously or were new topics.
So there are some minor changes which I can go over with one of you or both of you sometime tomorrow or the next day, because those are my only 2 days I have this week.
Okay.
But there are some other changes on page 4 of the executive summary. I think it is important to add right in that first paragraph that there's been an increase in the demand of affordable and market rate rental housing. I think we need to put rental in there after market rate housing.
Is this?
Top of
Oh,
4,
top.
right here,
Oh, okay.
right
Looking
there.
down here, it says rental.
Yeah, right here, before the word housing.
I think it's fair to say that there's an increased demand for both because home purchasing is not affordable. There's not a lot of inventory of affordable homes to buy either. So I think it's both. I'd have to look at the sentence before to know if we were talking about.
Let's see, how can you decide after community? At the same time, some empty nesters are looking to downsize to single, smaller homes or looking for other housing options. So I've figured in terms of, if we're talking about other options, but if you really mean it to be both, then.
Yeah, I think it really is both. I made the point, we talk about affordable, like my parents do pretty well for themselves. They'd be hard pressed to downsize into Penfield.
I think that was one of the findings from the 2010 comprehensive plan was to encourage more affordable housing. And
Right.
If you recall, we
Yeah.
had a couple developers that came in and talked about the roadblocks to that. We
Right.
don't really address that in this plan.
Yeah, part of
I think we kind of missed the boat on affordable housing. Remember that just, I forget who the developer was that came in. But, basically they're not going to be able to build anything because the cost of the land is too high.
that's definitely.
The opportunity cost of the land is too high to support affordable housing, so you got to get some grants or subsidies from somewhere. And I think we kind of dropped the ball on that. It's not really emphasized in this plan.
All right, well, that's certainly something we can look at. I think we've captured it as a recommendation, but we can certainly look to see if we need to add language, or that's something the town board would certainly want to talk about and think about.
I think that there's a way to, we've talked about keeping open space open, keeping commercial space commercial. Maybe it would be helpful if the town board would give us some guidance to identify some areas of town that may be practical to put in affordable housing. Because I think that's the big roadblock, is the cost of the land is too valuable.
Right, that's certainly something we can look at as an implementation item.
Okay, my other changes are on these pages are, this page anyway is kind of small enough, I'll go over it with.
Okay.
I'll go over it with you separately. I do think the one change somewhat more substantial on page 5, though, is where we are describing land use in terms of agricultural, open space, commercial, industrial, and residential, that we need a category in which to list all the sort of nonprofits, not-for-profits, things like legacy, things like the sort of places where some of our elders are living. They're residential, but they are not really residential in the sense that every person would be suited to living there. So they're kind of a restricted residential in a sense. You're not going to go on and live in Atria, an assisted living place. So I think it would be helpful because they probably have a different profile in terms of their cost for use than some of these others. And I don't know if that can be segregated out or not, if it's just.
I don't know that it was, and we were referencing a specific study that was done, so it'd be
Okay.
difficult to make that distinction, because I don't know that when they do these cost analysis, tax to cost, ratio assessments, I don't know how dialed down into the weeds they're getting with the distinction between the different types of residential, because even what we've heard as well is typically that residential piece is really considering, or sometimes it's only factoring in a standard or traditional single-family homes on separate lots. It's not considering multifamily residential, which might have a per-unit rate might be different than a single-family home's impact. So I think that's something we'll have to look at. I think that could be, honestly...
The way nonprofits are taxed, it's, they're exempt from like the town and county taxes, but a lot of them still pay special district taxes. Well, they
They
pay
can pay
special district
pilot.
taxes, which
Yeah.
go to things like sanitary sewers or storm sewers or the drainage fund and things like that. So it makes it a little murkier on, they're not paying the county levy, but they're paying for the sanitary operations and maintenance and the sanitary.
I wonder if that could be something that we identify as a potential opportunity, not so much for the town, but there could be, and again, this might not be something that needs to be in the comprehensive plan per se, but at the county level or the regional level, we've got the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. They're often a clearinghouse for data collection. They do the land use monitoring reports every year. There might be something we make a recommendation to them that at some point doing a regional sort of cost benefit analysis or tax, and property value analysis could be something that would be worthwhile to update those numbers and do that assessment, because many communities would benefit from that information.
Yeah, I mean, I think just our own planning board, if you're determining, a 6 in one, half a dozen in the other type of projects to approve, and you look at the cost of use of one is double the cost of use of the other, I think I would know which way I would lean in terms of what I would be more likely to approve for certain things. So I don't want to belabor it. I'm just saying.
There could be an opportunity, though, to update
It'd be
those.
helpful to have that kind of data, and I realize that this study, you're telling me the study doesn't have it, fine, but if it can be recommended, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay. On the following page of the executive summary on page 6, where it talks about the land use categories and zoning descriptions, one of the things that we recommended in the committee, that we talked about in the committee, was that the town consider a zoning category for non-agricultural open space that includes recreation. So for parks and golf courses and things like that. So because right now, a lot, I think Shadow Lake, and I know Shadow Pines was zoned a half-acre residential zoning, which kind of leaves a lot of kind of balls up in the air that, and some communities have this type of zoning that we wanted to recommend that they consider, that they look into new categories of this new category of zoning, and I don't see that listed.
Well, this is, so I think,
This is the existing.
yeah, but there is, it talks about the future land use. I don't know if we would get into that level of detail here in the executive summary. If you wanted to mention that in the future land use section.
That would be great.
That might be someplace
And I
where we
think
can add
discussed
it.
it potentially looking at overlay districts, and we had talked about some of the
But we can make
issues
sure
with
it's-
takings, but we can make sure it's,
More clearly reflected.
yeah.
I think if you're going to do that, I would agree with Donna that it should be listed, and you're listing all the other definitions of the legal uses.
Well, here we're providing the existing zoning
existing
districts. What Donna's alluding to is the exploration of maybe creating a separate or new
Right.
district. So I think that would be maybe confusing to add it here, but we certainly can make sure it's reflected in the future land use section.
Yeah, no, we certainly can. Yeah, this table was, every community uses slightly different acronyms. I mean, there is a standardization broadly nationally on R1, R2, R3, kind of things like that. Town of Penfield has used different nomenclature, and this was to help identify. So if you did look at the future land use map and you saw RA2 and had no idea what that meant, you'd be able to sort of understand with the description that it is a
Would it
sparsely
be-
developed
Would it be
land or
appropriate to put
agricultural.
a line in there, proposed land use? I just think if you're going through this and you're looking at all different land uses, and that's not on there, you're not going to click that that's maybe a new change.
But, since it doesn't exist on maps yet, I think what Doug is saying is that this is more like a key on a map in a way, this information. But if it's in that whole section titled future land uses, I think that's a better spot, because I think it could be explained a little bit there too, and
I
not
was just
just
thinking
listed.
both. No, it was
Oh,
both
well,
spots.
I'll leave it to you guys. Which,
All right, we'll take a look at it, and if we think there's a way to add it here without causing confusion, or, do you know what I mean, if we can't provide sufficient explanation, we can look at the future land use section.
Good. Introduction, purpose. Yes, Chuck, if you want to look on with me too, because I've got notes all over stuff, so you can see what
I take
I've.
your word on the spelling and the grammar.
Yeah, right, that's why we're not going
It's not
over.
my truck
We're not going over that. We're not getting into that. Doug and I had lots of fun with that, though.
Yes, we did. We did a lot of grammatical edits.
We should have,
Earlier on.
I owe you like a six-pack of whatever you drink for that.
I appreciate the sentiment.
I mean Diet Coke.
Yes.
But if nobody else minds just kind of skipping to some of this stuff rather than like,
Oh, yeah, we can, if there's wordsmithing or word changes that you're recommending, I think that's probably more appropriate for us to look at, either as, if you wanted to scan it to us like you did with the first round, we
Yeah.
could do that. That would be helpful.
or kind of just bash it out, and then we can just say thumbs up, thumbs down.
Okay.
Just move on. Okay. Yeah, the next couple of pages are more just issues like that, little redundancies and so forth. So if you want to just read a little and catch up, that's fine. Otherwise, we can jump to community profile.
Yeah, that sounds good. If you guys are ready to move on to Chapter 2. And again, the Chapter 2 is really a synopsis of the existing conditions summary that's contained in its entirety in the appendices. Wanted to give a snapshot so that people sort of understand where we are today and where we've been and where we've come from, but not have to go through the gory details of reading through every table and map and things like that, because I think people can really get lost in there and lose interest if they're not sort of into data and into that kind of analysis. It can definitely dissuade some folks from reading to the next chapter.
Who among us did not use Cliff Notes? Come on.
Yeah.
There is something that's very specific on page 6, though, and it might be an error, so I'd like us to catch it.
Oh, okay.
So under the title here, Economic Base, it lists Penfield's median household income as $101,250, but if you look in Appendix A, page 10, it lists, I'll flip to it.
It might have listed the
It
old
lists
data.
89,188,
Yeah, it's an old
which
number.
is, so are you going to update Appendix A?
Yep.
Appendix A needs to be updated.
Yep.
Because we're like the only ones that dropped in Appendix A by the looks of it, of all the different towns.
Yeah, no, we didn't, that was one that got missed.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I think for me, at least everything else looked pretty okay through here.
Good question on page 9.
Yeah.
Transportation planning. I guess there's two parts. One, we talked about the importance of coordinating with abutting counties and what development was going on. They anticipate, particularly thinking Wayne County for the east-west corridor. It'd be nice to have something in there.
We did add that as an implementation item at the end of the document, one of our implementation
Yeah, so this is just a summary of transportation planning that's been done to date, like up until now.
The other half of my question is, I know, is it Barton and LaJudas is doing a town-wide traffic study now. Do you know when you expect to get that back? Would it be in time?
It hasn't been initiated yet, so it's actually still included here in this plan as an implementation item. The nice thing about that is it'll be an early adopted an early acted-on implementation item because we're overlapping with the start of that. We didn't want to wait for the comprehensive plan's completion to start that because we knew how important that was, and it was a priority, whether we were doing a comprehensive plan update or not.
It does seem like the two are pretty closely related, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is we are moving ahead with we're not holding up the start of that project for the completion of this one.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
It is a lengthy process, and we didn't want to.
Do we want to make a reference or have you somewhere else?
So somewhere
This is
else,
going on.
yes, it's a
It's
recommendation.
referenced elsewhere. This is more historical information and less current, present, and future information. This is supposed to be sort of a background, brief background, less than what you'll see in the first appendix, Appendix A, but just give you an idea of the transportation planning efforts to date, but does not include ongoing or future planning items.
So let's see, residential living looks pretty good. Again, some tweaks, but
Okay.
for a later meeting later this week, maybe. Community resources, I would add one small thing on page 17.
Okay.
Under local history, we have the town historian, but we also have that library history room.
The local history room.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good addition. I thought we had that mentioned somewhere, and I apologize. You'll note, too, that in this area, Roland's comments were addressed in this section as well. He raised a couple of points, and those comments were reflected in
Gun
here.
Club and the faith communities, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we also added Boy Scouts, local Boy Scouts.
I thought
Yes,
they were in
they should be
here.
included. And
Let's see.
I thought they were referenced.
They're referenced someplace else.
They
they're
are.
referenced here, yeah.
Yeah, down here, Chuck.
Yeah. Boy Scouts of America and Girl Scouts of the USA, which I think are the two
Yeah,
shared
'cause that-
organization names.
Private and nonprofit. These are more,
Actually,
Municipal.
more timely, we're now called Scouts USA.
Oh, okay. I thought we Googled this.
I did look at, I know Scouts USA is sort of the name, but I think the technical name or the legal name of the parent organization is still Boy Scouts of America. But
could
I
we just
I
put
verify that.
parentheses around the word boy?
Yeah,
maybe?
I can-
leave it that
I'll-
way, because most people will maybe still think of it
Verify
as Boy
name.
Scouts.
Yeah, we'll verify that.
Popcorn versus cookies,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
We don't sell pop.
One is
Oh,
a
I thought
lot
you were
better than the other.
Popcorns. Oh, my, I thought you guys were the popcorn sellers.
Bad. The Boy Scout popcorn's so bad.
It's going to a good cause.
It does.
It's a good cause, yes. Let's not,
I
let's not.
sold a
let's not
lot
dis-
of it in my time. so
Let's not
it's-
disparage any of the fundraising efforts of any organization.
I would steer you to the nice fresh Christmas trees from Boy Scout Troop 312 at
there you
Little Ways.
I'm good with, again, with little tweaks, but jumping ahead to page 21, we go from section C to section F. So I'm assuming we really want to go to the section D? Or is there an E and F and are there missing sections?
Where are we?
Page 20.
21.
21. Page 20 is section
those-
C,
C.
and then on page 21, it
Can we
goes
go
to
up?
section F.
Can we go up a second? Because some of these got moved around. So it's just a lettering issue.
Yeah.
So,
It's probably an InDesign issue.
No, I mean like on the,
Yes.
yeah, but
so
you
we,
see,
so we have
there are four
we only have
strategies,
four.
A, B, C,
Yeah,
D.
yes.
So it just means that that F needs to just be titled D.
that's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I like
You
cross out
could just make that,
D.
yeah, it just needs to be, it has to be retitled
renumber.
D. Thank you.
Re-letter.
Relettered, yeah, thank you. I was going to say renumbered, I'm like, it's not a number, it's a letter. Okay,
Yeah, and then other stuff I'll give you later.
perfect, yeah, thank you. And that's a result of some things getting moved out to the, probably either other sections, we
Yeah, I
shifted things
I
around.
saw a few things
Or
that
there
seemed
was a-
like cut and pasty, like, I've just seen that paragraph somewhere else.
And there's
you
a
know,
few where, upon the last review, we worked on merging redundant topics where we may have had two strategies that were very similar, and we
Yeah.
incorporated them together.
Okay. On 22, the economic development page, when we start that, something that I think would be helpful to add to people, and I think it was in the prior draft, but it was like a little wordy in the prior draft, and now it's just got down to sort of little bullets. I think a hybrid might be great, where we list the different commercial and industrial and mixed-use areas. If we just give a tiny bit of information about each of them, just a little one-line blurb about, so like Browncroft Boulevard and Creek Street, for people who are not that familiar with the area yet or something, can say low-volume retail, banking, blah, 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 that sort of stuff.
Okay.
For, the Four Corners, we can list just kind of the general vibe of the area, like sort of.
We can certainly do that. We had previous versions, I think, that had a little more of a description.
Yeah, there was a real kind of
Each
description
one of them had at
heavy.
least 1 or 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, they were real description heavy in the last one, but I think just a blurb or a little blurb.
We can add a sentence or so after each one. That should be no problem.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, especially if someone was reading it who was new to town or maybe from another town using this as a sort of
Right. That's a good, thank you. Yep. That's a good change.
Good. Let's see, next thing is just pretty, at least on my copies, are pretty simplistic stuff. But now we come to agriculture.
Okay. Here we are.
So I
go back to page the 20.
sorry.
I'm still looking at the economic development. It may not be something for this, but we're undergoing this substantial mixed-use development, but we're also saying that office space, we're saturated, retail and service, because of the internet, is being cut down. What parts of the business are we trying to attract with the with the mixed-use district?
So I think for the mixed-use district, it's really going to depend on the market demand and market change over time. So right now, there might be an experience where office is in flux. Retail is also in flux in terms of the kinds of businesses. But new businesses are emerging, so I think there will always be a demand for service-oriented establishments, things that are, restaurants, hair salons, nail, things that where people have to go and get services. There'll always be an opportunity for those, and then there's new emerging, businesses and new retailers that may not be here in the marketplace now in New York that need to make their way. And so could Penfield be a location for those kinds of developments when they're looking for, new sites? So those are the kinds of things that we might be looking for in the mixed-use development district.
I apologize, I haven't been to Penfield Square. What commercial businesses have opened up there? And what ones are going into the Arbor Heights? Is that what you're calling the other one?
Well, there's Penfield Heights and there's the Arbors.
Penfield Heights, okay, I'm sorry.
So at Penfield Square, we haven't processed through the 2 conditional use permits yet, so I don't know exactly, but there'll be at least 1 food establishment. I believe we're having a pre-construction meeting on that tomorrow, so they're about to break ground on their main commercial. They do have an existing food establishment. We're working with Episcopal on that for making sure it's operating as it was described and explained during their public hearing.
And then for the Arbors and for Penfield Heights, I don't know if they had identified
They didn't have identified tenants.
yet,
Yeah.
but they had dedicated space for non-residential uses. And so that often for those kinds of developments, sometimes rooftops will drive the business, so they need to have the residential component in place first, and then that creates critical mass, which is a lovely term, a planning term, meaning it creates a center of activity and, more importantly, people to utilize the services. So often that'll drive, the development and the tenancy.
And occasionally they have to be fairly vague about it due to ongoing negotiations. So I know the Pathstone Group had at least 2 establishments that were lined up, but because pen wasn't to paper quite yet, they could not release the names of those.
Yeah.
But I know one was a food establishment and the other was a retail establishment.
Yeah, and there was one, I think, service provider as well.
And there was one service provider as well. Yep.
So any other
just-
thoughts or notes for
Yeah,
that
heads
section,
up.
Chuck? Or are you
No,
not ready
no,
to
I'm
move on?
Yep,
Okay.
that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So here for the agricultural opportunities, tried to sort of capture what we heard at the committee meeting, what we heard through the stakeholder conversations that had happened in earlier in the process, and then also reflecting on sort of what the future opportunities might be, and trying to keep it fairly open-ended. So I think that, there's some, and I think, we heard the need to consider potential renewable energy projects or production, in the areas that are currently intended for agricultural use, so we want to explore that. And I think just in general, wanting to encourage the viability of active agricultural operations. And agriculture as an industry is evolving, always is. New technology emerges, new opportunities might present themselves. So we wanted to try to keep this as open-ended as we could, to be flexible and honestly to open the town up for future, funding opportunities that might present themselves.
I appreciate that, but I do think we need to give some more specifics, and what I would suggest is what I've done, and Chuck, what I've done here for us to look at too is comparing the section to the proposed actions.
Okay.
So I've been trying to do that as best as I could with looking at certain sections that, let's just go to page 27, and I'd like to refer to one specific paragraph more so than the others. So it is the last short paragraph above the word policy statement. It's the one that begins with consistent with trends across our region. Mm-hmm. So here, it might seem kind of like wordsmithing, but I think that there is meaning embedded in the changes. So consistent with trends across our region and beyond, existing farmland in Penfield is actively worked by fewer farmers, most of whom are older. In some cases, the next generation does not wish to farm, and other farmers do not wish to take on more responsibility. As a result, local farming activity in Penfield is somewhat questionable in the long run without creative, comprehensive intervention. The unpredictable weather cycles caused by climate change adds additional stress. That is what I would say, what I think the paragraph should be changed to.
Okay.
To read, because it's not just the next generation's interest in farming, it's also current farmers who can't take on more, and they can't attract outside farmers to come in. And part of the problem is that climate change is making everybody's job in the agricultural industry much harder.
I don't know if we want to get into a political discussion on this thing about climate change, but I would argue that the existing farms that are in place and successful are doing quite well, and in fact want to expand. I know my neighbor was always looking for more opportunities to expand. I think agriculture is certainly alive and well and profitable and sustainable in Penfield. They were leaning more towards value-added farming, where they're, instead of selling field crops, maybe they're selling Christmas trees, but it's still an active farming. But the more value you can add to your product before you sell it, the more money they're going to make. So I would disagree respectfully with that. I don't think that that's an issue that we're struggling with. I think the bigger struggle is the value of the land. and keeping the development out of the farming areas.
So I think there might be, this might be the case where you're maybe both right. There might be some farming operations that are doing very well and have a generational concession plan in place where it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. But I can also see a scenario where farming property that's currently actively farmed might at some point not be viable to be farmed any longer because either there's no interest or demand for that land and the property owners and family or the folks who've been farming it no longer either want to or can. And I think that's, so I think it could be both. Maybe we can look at a way to sort of reflect that in this sentence. It may not be every farm, it could be some, it could be, you know, it's, this is, I think it's also, this is it's difficult to predict what we don't know now. We don't know now. We don't know who's struggling to make ends meet. We don't know who's looking to sell their, you know, lease their land.
And we don't know whose kids are interested in taking up the family farm in the future and who's have no interest.
But I think there's two things we can agree on. One is we're always going to need to eat, and some of us more than others. And two, we want Penfield, I think that we want Penfield to support whatever we can to support farming.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to get more specific than that to say this guy's not going to make it, this guy is, this guy's kids don't want it. I don't know if we need to get into those.
No, and that's why we wanted to leave it broad, because leaving it broad provides more opportunities for flexibility in supporting farmers and agricultural operations in the future. If we narrow it down or get too specific, it can eliminate funding opportunities. It can create negative consequences whereby it's too detailed, so that getting a little bit of flexibility outside of something that is stated is harder to do.
So
I think some of that was coming possibly from the grandkids of farmers that had sold their conservation easements, and now they're limited, their development potentials are limited. I would, and they were asking us to go back and revisit those easements, and I think that would not be a proper thing to do, at least to reference that. So that's.
well, I think this is a good example of how we've got some differing opinions potentially, and ultimately, I think what we're going to look to do is the town board is going to also have, they haven't, as we've mentioned before, they're going to see this document, you know, for the first time next week, and they'll dive through here and they'll have their own opinions. They're going to ask the community at large to provide their, you know, other comments. So my hope would be that folks that are impacted, especially in the agricultural areas, we want to make sure we do our best to make sure that they have access to the plan. We'll have printed copies available for viewing and reading here. We'll probably put one at the library as a resource. And then obviously it'll be available online. So we'd want that kind of feedback and input, because maybe this section gets refined based on that type of follow-up input.
But I think it also should be noted when we started this, what was it, 2 years ago?
No, 4.5 years ago.
4.5 years ago, the table was full of committee members, and now there's 2. So the interest, I think it's difficult, and maybe that's part of your job, is to generate excitement about the comprehensive plan. I mean, it's like,
I think part of it is
nobody's interested in it.
Part of it is getting it out there. Once the plan document is done, sometimes the task of getting the plan put together, that can lose its luster. I'm hoping there'll be a resurgence in interest once there's something to react to. Some people like to be the editor, some people like to be the writers. You guys get to be both, which is, we really appreciate.
Well, I just sort of, I want to come back, Chuck, to something, though, that I recall very clearly from our meetings with the farmers, and that I took very detailed notes on, and that was, and I had subsequent conversations with a couple of them on, and one was Marty Shute, I mean, not Marty, but Evan, his son, Evan Shute, talking about how really dramatically impacted his business was by climate change compared to his grandfather's business, his father's business, how often he lost crops compared to each of the generations before him, and it's an almost exponential increase. So I think that it's germane to mention the fact that climate change is making it less desirable for a lot of people to jump into an industry, to kind of just jump into this industry. But by the same token, one of the other things that we talked about was that there are people in agriculture in the West and Midwest who are getting clobbered by droughts and wildfires and floods and all kinds of crap, who would love to come to an area like this because we think we got climate change problems. That's nothing compared to them. So we have to be able to make sure that we are potentially marketing, and this would be a regional thing, not just a Penfield thing, but a regional thing, that we are marketing our wonderful farmland to these people who are impacted, because Chuck is absolutely right. Everybody needs food. And it becomes a matter of food insecurity in the United States if we don't have these sort of backup plan, kind of countrywide backup plans for if you can't produce here, what can you do? So I think we need to incorporate some of that bigger thinking into this plan. And, I spoke to Bill Wickham. It broke my heart that for years I've volunteered picking up, ever since they've had a CSA at Wickham Farms, I've been over there every Monday morning in the growing season picking up all of their excess produce to bring to the Penfield Ecumenical Food Shelf. He gave up doing the CSA. This was our last year for it because it's just too much work. He's been trying for over 2 years now to get anybody to farm that land for him, to buy the land, to rent it, to farm it, anything. Nothing. He's finally just thrown in the towel. And I don't know that he's going to sell it right away, but he's certainly not going to be producing food for our community on it.
So I think I'm hearing a couple of things, and I want to make a note that, because I think the point that you just made is it's not just Penfield. So I think there's an opportunity for Penfield to be included in a either countywide or region-wide conversation to talk about agriculture, farming. We are not the only farming community in Monroe County. We're certainly not the only farming community in the 9-county Finger Lakes region. So I think that would be maybe a compelling opportunity to engage in regional dialogue to identify opportunities where we might be able to bolster or maintain viable agriculture and marketing ourselves nationally or globally even.
Yeah, and so I think in the implementation, the proposed actions, that would be a good implementation idea.
I agree.
We could instigate, we could be the instigators of a regional dialogue about that, Little Penfield, getting a dialogue about that kind of stuff going so that, and then we've got people like Heidi Rothfuss and her siblings who say, geez, we're never going to be able to pay the taxes on that land. But guess what? If you have somebody from California swooping in who's willing to pay, California prices for the land,
sure,
everybody wins,
Well, and I think so. The other thing I want to be mindful of, and I'm taking off my comprehensive plan hat for just a second. I know the county is currently in the process of completing their comprehensive plan. I want to make sure that this is captured in there, and then. I've been engaged in that process as a representative of the town, and then I know that they're doing their climate action plan as well, and I feel like there's an opportunity there as well. So we can, this is coming up at a really good time because there's an opportunity to maybe capture it, not just here for ourselves, which is important, but also to maybe make sure that it's captured at the regional level, at the county level as well.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Let's see. And there are just some other things that I think we need to kind of include here. Some other of the recommendations that the committee made. But one very important thing that we talked about that was kind of on a par with the renewable energy production and, how what should the regulations look like, not for us to decide, but there better be regulations, was something that Webster was sort of struggling with, and we need to be thinking about that and have that somewhere in here and have it also listed as a proposed action. And that is to make some sort of an evaluation of how big is too big a greenhouse? When does it become an industrial facility? When is it just a greenhouse? Because some of that big, Doug, you probably know about it, that big proposed, humongous greenhouses, that the greenhouses themselves are acres and acres and acres and acres. And the truck traffic in and out is what you would expect out of a big, manufacturing facility, as is the noise, as is the light pollution, as is the everything.
Yeah, so I think for that topic, I would want to identify it as an opportunity, and that might be a recommendation for further study and analysis. I don't know that we could accomplish it here.
No. That's what I'm saying, is I think we need to just kind of mention that we're aware that this is something that has been developed in other communities, but we need to determine whether it's right for Penfield, and if so, what's the scale?
I'd also want to take a minute to make sure that we reference the New York State Ag and Markets law, because ultimately they trump the town. And so I'd want to maybe even mention that so we understand sort of the hierarchy of regulation, and certainly to the extent that we can regulate what that would look like. And we talk about the fact that we should have some further discussion and come up with parameters. That's going to be something that in a future code update, if you were going to be...
I was going to say, this is an overlap between agriculture and zoning and economic development. This is like
I think another factor is the conservation easement restrictions on some of the properties may preclude building those giant greenhouses, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So that's equally as restrictive as the state, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think for, we'd have to take a look to see what's covered, what's not covered. But yeah, that's an important, did you make a note of that, or do you want me to make a note of it? Okay.
Yep.
And just where we're talking about the renewable energy production on page 29, I would throw a sentence in, something like, and I'll show you guys this separately. Policies should also protect the visual environment for travelers on nearby roads and residents' homes by ensuring appropriate visual buffers around large photovoltaic arrays. Something like that we want to make sure that we state it right here, that we don't want to have,
seas of solar panels.
Seas of solar panels just exposed, and, it would hurt homeowners' values. It would be ugly on highways. It would potentially be a little dangerous if you got a lot of reflection, I guess, and stuff. So
I would like to see you remove the first sentence. I don't think that we should be exploring policy changes that promote ag or solar as a primary use within the agricultural district. I'm not supportive of that. I don't think that you want to go into something specific as agrivoltaics, because that just doesn't work. You can't grow crops underneath solar panels. At this point, it's not a viable process. If you could ask the farmers that, and you're getting into something really specific.
So I think what they mean by a primary use, meaning that on a plot of land that didn't have a primary structure on it, that they could be used as considered a primary use.
I understand what primary use of agricultural fields means, and I don't agree with that.
Well, I think that would be another thing that we'd want the town board to have an opportunity to take a look at. I'll note your objection to it, but I think that
I'm objecting to the line that says we should explore policies that promote it. I don't think we want to be promoting large solar farms. I think we want to be against it.
Oh, I was going to say, just what if we said instead of promote, that permit, that allow for it, not that.
I don't think we want to allow for it. Do you want to be in a position where you touched a nerve here, where you want to be promoting the digging up of our agricultural fields to put solar panels in?
If the field.
You don't.
Well, I'm going to respectfully maybe disagree with you personally, but also I'm going to yield to say that that's a bigger conversation for the community at large, for the town board to determine what the direction of the town is going to be.
But it's not our job to be taking a position where we're promoting it. We should be neutral.
Well, it's a future land use. Right now, you couldn't have you couldn't have solar panels by themselves. Our code is silent on it. So it's got to.
Let's make it against it then.
Well, we don't want to do that either, because at some point you're going to find that the state law is going to trump our zoning, and if you prohibit it, they'll fall back to the state code, and their state code, as long as we have reasonable regulations, we can typically protect or provide protections for these.
Right, but I get all that, and it's probably not a discussion for this document, but I think that I object to the policy changes of promoting it, because I think that's a big mistake. And I also object to the sentence about agrovoltaics. I think that should come out too.
Well, at a minimum, I think promote is
We can
too
change the
strong a
word to allow.
We can change that.
We can
Permit or allow, and
Sure.
then we'll take it from there, Chuck, to see if the town board wants to knock it down a level from there. And I understand what you're saying about, because I looked into this for some other project. In deserty, dry, sunny all the time places, it kind of works to grow crops under, crops that would get burned, basically, low-growing things, strawberries or whatever. But we don't really get enough sun a lot of the time anyway to make that kind of thing work. So something like maybe pollinator habitats might work, but a lot of this other stuff probably wouldn't work. But I don't think it's for, you're better versed than I am, but it's certainly not for somebody like me to say what can or can't work under those circumstances. And I think the town board, and then again soliciting, making sure that when we have public meetings that the farmers themselves come in and talk about this.
Sure.
And weigh in on this.
Yeah, I think that's important as well.
Can you live with that, Chuck?
I'm sorry, was there something proposed?
Well, we're going to just change the language
we're gonna change
to
the
allow, so it's not it's not promote.
We'll find alternative
And
language.
then getting the feedback from our local farmers about what they think about this whole thing.
And
Yeah, and I'd still like to argue that we remove the agrovoltaics.
so one of the things I'll share with you is that when we do share the document with the town board, we are going to note that this meeting's taken place, and so that if, to the extent that we don't make a change that that's been identified or talked about at tonight's meeting, as a staff, I think the town board will have the benefit of seeing this meeting, and we'll be able to weigh in on their thoughts about it. And then want to hear more from the community. I think the other thing, too, is that I know the town board will want to make sure that we're actively reaching out to various, to the extent that past stakeholders were involved, we'll make sure that they're aware that a comprehensive plan draft is out in the world for them to review. And I think we'll try to make sure we do that kind of follow-up for any stakeholder groups that we met with during the planning process.
Okay, so I'm still hung up on paragraph B. So you're going to take that promote out.
Yep.
You won't take out the agrivoltaics comment.
Yes.
Well, the second sentence is just a definition.
Right.
Then I would draw you down to the second sentence of the second paragraph, where it says that we should explore the utilization of agricultural lands for exclusive use as solar energy facilities. I would request that that sentence be stricken.
Chuck, ultimately, these things are coming from the state. So we can strike it from the document, but that doesn't change how the state regulations are coming down, and it would behoove. So the argument with this statement was it would behoove us to take a look at some moderating legislation regarding large-scale or moderate-scale solar facilities, because there is already state regulations in place. If we prohibit it and somebody wants to do it, they'll fall back on the state regulations.
Yeah, I understand that, Doug. I'm not suggesting that we prohibit it. I'm suggesting that we not promote it.
And I don't think we're suggesting promoting it. In this, we're looking at ramifications to, we're looking at.
So I think the
Would you
last line.
consider a compromise such as the town should explore ways of regulating the utilization of agricultural lands for exclusive use as solar production facilities?
Could you say that again?
Maybe. I'm thinking on my feet here.
Same thing.
The town should explore the regulation of the use of agricultural lands for exclusive use as solar energy production facilities.
The regulation of the use of agricultural lands.
I don't personally want to give up our agricultural lands for a bunch of solar farms. It may be forced on us, but it isn't yet. So why don't we, maybe our approach should be to get ahead of it and work on zoning regulations now.
So I think what Doug was trying to say, though, is even if our zoning regulations say something isn't allowed, if the state says it is in ag and district, and especially in ag districts.
I think we're going around in circles on language. I think we both are trying to say the same thing, is that we should be taking a look at how we can best adopt regulations that consider the ramifications of solar. That doesn't mean, yes, go forward solar. It means we take a look at the pros and the cons and try to figure out a approachable way forward.
Yeah, we'll certainly look at this and maybe soften the language. I think that we can certainly look at that.
Can I throw something else out here?
Sure.
Can we beef up the educational part a little bit?
Oh, in A?
Yeah, in A. One of the recommendations that we talked about in our committee was partnering with organizations like Cornell Cooperative Extension, and there's a group in the city called BUGS, B-U-G-S. Urban Gardens is the U and the G. I can't think of what the other two letters are. But partnering with other organizations in our area that are either actively trying to teach people about farming or growing things, or that are assistive in those things. And the first thing that comes to mind is Cornell Cooperative Extension, of course. But other organizations within our local region, let's say.
We can certainly add that, and in that last sentence, we can look at that. And I think we'll also reference grant-seeking opportunities. We actually have pursued one, and are through the Genesee Regional Markets Authority. Genesee Region Market Authority, or I think Authority, and the town has received, it has nothing to do with this comp plan, but it has received a grant to fund promotional efforts, and so we're going to be doing a project in the Four Corners that promotes the town of Penfield's agricultural history and current activity.
Yeah, well, that looks like number one under the proposed actions.
Yes.
Already, but to just
add other
kind
partners.
of add it here as not just so much seeking grant funding to do it, but actually what the idea would be.
Okay.
Why we would do such a thing.
Sure.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah, we can certainly add a couple of lines in there.
Good, thank you. Okay, whoops, I'm going to put this back. So I'm going to do the same thing here. 769. Okay. So, whoops. Messing my whole document up here. So, in natural resources, oh, brother. I didn't have much to comment on here.
Okay.
If you have a quick.
And just one
look at it,
note
what you
is,
think.
I apologize, we have 2 placeholders for photos, and up above, for the agritourism I forgot to fill those in, so we have some photos we're going to plug in.
We thought we were supposed to draw it in crayons. I burned out my box of Crayolas on it. Under natural resources, I didn't have any real comments about the section, but with respect to the proposed actions, I think it would be, and there's one thing, I don't know where we should put it, I just know that we need it, and maybe it belongs in a different part of the document. But I won't start with that one. But I think we need to put in, under natural resources, to incorporate habitat preservation in designated areas of, within designated areas of specific parks and park-like settings. You have a big page about monarch butterflies, so I think it behooves us to kind of put our money where our mouth is and not just talk about monarch butterflies, but to talk about, habitat preservation in those
Okay.
areas. And then by leaving it broad, it can be for birds, plants, pollinators, whatever. And it's something I know with Shadow Pines we've talked about, trying to work with some of the guys from the town about, where can that be? Not me working with them, but people who know about this stuff working with them about, what should we leave always kind of wild versus what should get mowed every 3 years sort of stuff. The thing that I don't know where it belongs, and the more I'm talking about it, the more I think it doesn't belong here, though, is reestablishing open space purchasing as a routine portion of the town's budget. That was for many, many years. There was an open space bond that lasted for many, many years on a lot of the lands that, we were just talking here about that are protected either with easements or with outright purchasing.
What I
I think
think
we did.
we talked about the open space plan, updating that to identify whether or not that was something that the town wanted to proceed with. So I think that should come out of the open space plan update. That really might not be something that's appropriate to include as a recommendation here in this document because we haven't done the evaluation on sort of what the opportunities are. That would be my response to that. What I think maybe we could do is have that be something that we bring to the town board and have them decide if it's that the direction they want to go in, where that's because that's a town budget decision. So that could be something that I could be explored through the open space plan update, which would be coming up because those are done every.
And the bottom, so we have it under community character and design. We have 3 separate actions on that. Research the availability of grant funding for open space, development rights acquisition, or other land preservation, identify new areas that would be ideal for preservation, and undertake a 25-year update on the 2002
I'm sorry, let me
open space
What
talk
plan.
page
to
is
the
that,
mic.
Doug? I'm sorry.
This is on page 71.
So on that last item, number 71, we could update it to say undertake a 25-year update on the 2002 open space plan and identify a funding mechanisms, budgeting and funding mechanisms.
Great.
Right, needed to implement.
Yes, that would be great. That'd be terrific.
That seems like the best place to put it, I think.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah, no worries. It was a long document. You was on toward the end of the
Yeah, well, and that was a hard one to characterize on where we wanted it to
should
go, but
land.
open space, we felt, went well under community character.
Yeah, okay, and I was kind of thinking more like
but
Either
natural
natural resources or
there's a lot of
land
them
use- or
that
land use
like
planning.
they do cross topics.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Got it. Okay, great, thank you.
Excuse me for, don't stop the meeting for me. I just need to exit for just a quick second.
Sure.
So in paragraph F, back on the resources, is that what we're still doing?
What page is that, Chuck?
35.
35, okay.
There's good language in there on the identifying the contaminated sites, but my guess is that's all been done already.
I only
And I
think we
don't think
have
that's something that we're going
one
to
or
be able to
two.
budget for because of the cost, so.
I think there's only one or two that we're aware of, but there's other areas that have potential that may not have been identified as a contaminated site. I know there's been discussion on like the east side of Empire Boulevard that it may have at one time historically been used for the dumping of ash
Lot of-
from the
lot
power
of- lot
plant.
of fly
But
ash.
it's one of those where until we do the environmentals, we don't necessarily know. I know there's one or two sites that I believe are still considered contaminated sites that are open cases with the DEC.
I like the language in there. I just wonder if we need to stress more that due to the cost, it's kind of out of our hands, and we need to, like your language about the brownfield and going through the EPA for grant money to do those investigations and ultimately the remediations is very expensive.
It is.
It's
And
not something that we're going to do because of the cost.
no, but if there's opportunities for funding or additional study or mechanisms to help clean up.
No, I agree.
brownfield sites.
That's why I think
Yeah.
that part of it should be using all, going outside and getting other funds and grants should be the thrust of that because, we cleaning up one of those sites would kill our whole budget. So I think it'd be important that we look outside of the state and the federal government for help on that stuff because there is quite a bit of money out there available. We use a lot of it in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm familiar with how much it costs. So.
Okay.
Any other substantive points or discussion for this section?
No?
I think that's the end of that section. Are you done?
Sustainability, I think, really does need attention, though. I'm going to pull out page 69 is the implementation page for this. I'm going to pull that forward. And I have to say, I couldn't always match up everything in the implementation with everything in the policy. So, you just holler out to me if, well, it's in the implementation, that's why it isn't here or something.
Right.
But I feel that with respect to sustainability, kind of a critical thing that we did not mention is the existential threat associated with climate change. I mean, and that is kind of like that's the elephant in the room when it comes to sustainability. And that we can't just talk about things like street lighting and electrical vehicle charging. We have to contextualize those in the bigger picture. I mean, it's always good to be efficient and it's always good to save money, but it's critically necessary. It isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a very, very important thing to do. So I think that's sort of the context that this whole chapter should sort of reflect in some way.
I would argue to leave it as sustainability and energy efficiency. I wouldn't go down the road of climate change because I think that it gets pretty political.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry, Chuck, but I'm going to just flat out disagree with you on this.
Okay.
If climate change is politically incorrect, then let everybody who doesn't believe in climate change tell me why oceans are rising and why average temperatures around the world are rising and why we have all this instability in terms of weather patterns. And I mean, they're not meteorological, they're climatological problems. And so,
Regardless, I don't know that we're going to solve that debate in the comprehensive plan.
no, but I think it's the context for the types of things that we need to do to make this community a model for how communities should move forward. I mean, this is a plan to take us out 12 years. If you look at projections out 12 years, I mean, I've been to Glacier National Park, and I've seen it from going from, I don't know, dozens and dozens of glaciers to 16 glaciers 10 years ago to now I don't even know what they have left now. And that's not a weather problem. That's a real thing.
So I think that,
I think there's two sides to everything, Donna.
so what I'll say here is this is a new section for the comprehensive master plan. This was not in the 2010 plan, which is why it's structured a little bit differently. It doesn't jump right into a policy statement. It gives a little bit of a history of action here in Penfield. Penfield has always been a leader in sustainability in terms of actionable items. The first one to have an EV charging station, among the first to have a solar array offsetting, at town facility. Use of, I'm sorry, but
We're early adopters in CCA.
Well, I don't think anybody's arguing about sustainability. I think you want to stress the energy efficient building, energy efficient lighting, but I would leave comments out about
I'm wondering if this
climate
is
change.
one of those, again, going back to the one sticking point we had in the agricultural section, do we leave this as a recommendation, something that the town board should look at, whether they want to strengthen the language around climate action,
Yeah, so I know one of our implementation items we did discuss. I mean, we are working with the county on their climate action plan as an involved group. Whether we want to have, like Kira was saying, have the town board weigh in, do we strengthen that language and look at what we could do from a town level, or start with having the community work at a regional level with the county and the regional planning councils to start there and then work our way potentially in the future.
Yeah, so I think, Donna, I don't know what your thought was in terms of where that might fit into this section, if you gave that any thought, as, providing that sort of contextual framework.
Well, I can go in and contextualize it for you, sure.
Is there some place where we can, look at maybe in the policy statement that we add a reference to climate, like recognizing that climate change is impacting, so there's a reference to it, but not.
Oops. Oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry, I've gone backwards with my pages.
No, that's okay. And obviously, when we're going back and forth between implementation and the sections, it's.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot of work reviewing this plan, as you probably figured out. I didn't think of a specific place to put it in, but I can do it tonight.
No, if you don't, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I wasn't sure if you had a thought or an idea of where that would go.
No, because I think it actually needs to be a thread that runs through a lot of this stuff, and I think otherwise the name of this section should just be, energy saving activities or something like that. Which seems pretty lame when you're talking about a comprehensive plan, because it's mostly just on energy saving stuff, the street lighting, the vehicle charging stations.
Well, those are all past activities that we have implemented up until now. The reduce, reuse, recycle, the pursuing sustainable technologies and methods, community choice aggregation, those are all about, using and exploring renewable energy and other sustainable technologies. I think policy changes and programs that support the town's sustainability priorities, that's fairly open-ended.
But if the sustainability policies don't reflect back to some sort of a core belief about what sustainability, why do we need sustainability? Why not just keep burning fossil fuels? Why not just have, gas guzzling vehicles other than just sheer cost? Because we have a climate crisis in the universe, in the world, maybe not the universe, but on Earth,
Okay.
So I really think that it's a kind of it's kind of irresponsible for us to not have that context in these plans unless you just don't want to address it at all, which would be irresponsible in a different way, I think.
I think you're addressing it in some really good ideas here as far as energy efficiency and light bulbs, but I don't think the town needs to be taking a political standpoint, a position on global warming. If that happens to be a sideline of these energy reduction efforts, that's great, but I think it's great to be having a section on sustainability, and I think some of these ideas are great. But I don't believe we should be in the political arena of
Well, there's a
arguing,
difference
so.
because you think it's political, I think it's scientific.
Okay, well,
There's the difference, Chuck.
nothing wrong with having a difference in opinion,
I think it's
so.
politics.
I don't think there's a problem with having a difference in opinion, Donna.
Okay.
We just need to work through it.
Yeah, so I think for this one, what maybe we'll do is Doug and I can take a look back to see if there's a place, areas where we can look at
Broadening out.
maybe having a discussion talking about climate change as a sort of a context. We can look at some places where it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I think we can also include, again, to the town board, a notation that, they, with almost not a directive is not the right word, but a request that the issue of climate change be looked at as to whether or not it should be strengthened or bolstered in this section of the plan.
I don't think anybody's going to argue with any of these, your strategies. I mean,
No, I don't think anybody's gonna argue
it only makes sense to use less resources if we can. We could even go farther along and mention in another bullet point the state's energy code that's been updated and is pretty strict, and we could encourage people to do gold designed buildings, and I mean there's a lot of
And some of those are
ways
addressed in the implementation items, so I believe we've looked at, or one of the ideas was
but
looking
it's
at
not a bad thing
ways
to stress, right? I mean,
incentivize going above and beyond the minimum for like the energy code, if there's
Right.
a way that we
well, the
could.
new code's pretty tough.
So, yeah, referencing that would be a good
Yeah, I think we should make, in
feature.
fact, I'm not sure we do reference New York State Energy Code. If we don't, we will add that as
Yeah,
a,
I didn't see it.
and I think the other place we can also add it, we can add in either encouraging, but LEED certified buildings.
Yeah, that would
And
be
there's
great.
tons of money out there for through NYSERDA for energy conservation. We could certainly, I'm sure the town's working with them on facilities anyway, but that would not be a bad bullet point to.
Yeah, we'll make sure that in the implementation section, that if it's not already adequately or specifically mentioned, that we mention those two things in particular.
Something on page 41,
Okay.
where we talk about CCA. So I don't know whether you can get this data, but it would really strengthen the point in terms of sustainability if you can find out kind of what the percentage of people buying green energy versus buying conventional energy through CCA is, because in the CCA plan that was adopted by Penfield, consumers could go either way. And fossil fuel was still just nominally a scooch cheaper on the surface. It appears to be appeared at the beginning to be a scooch cheaper on the surface. But if nobody switched to green, then then CCA was not sustainable. I mean, it saved some people some money, but it wasn't a
Yeah, I
sustainable
think our two options
move.
were 50% and 100% green.
Yeah.
So I can see if that's something our sustainability.
But yeah, if we could kind of show that we as a community really went for kind of the green energy on it, I think that's a feather in our cap and something to just remind people of.
We can take a look at that and see if that's a data point we can get.
Yeah.
It might be interesting, too, to add what people are actually seeing savings on their bills that have switched to that.
I know we have that information.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into it now, though, Doug, but
No.
that information is available.
Yes, it is.
They do periodic updates to sort of like, they look every 3 months, every 6 months. Actually, by the month, you can see what the rate is for conventional supply of electricity versus CCAs. So that's something we can
rates.
also
Yep.
maybe potentially include. And actually, what I'm thinking about is maybe we'll grab one of the most recent graphs, and
Yep.
we might swap out photos on this page. We threw in the code book picture just because, we needed a photo on the page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we
code
might
update.
eliminate that picture, and we might add in a graphic that shows CCA data. That could be helpful,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
All right, I think that would be a
agree,
good
yeah.
change. And also help us to contextualize the recommendation.
How about the data for the performance of your solar array, you put it at the town highway garage? That might help.
Yeah, we have that information as well. I thought we included it somewhere in the document. I thought we referenced it in the description of like the things to date. So in the pages above.
The best day in the summer, weren't they something like 8% or 9% efficient? It's all on the town website.
1 second. Over.
Don't think we
up
did.
up above, right? Oh, you're on. No, down below. Right there. Didn't we talk about what its production is?
Yep. Yeah, we
so
have
you
its,
said
yeah,
it off-
in
it
broad
offs-
terms, they have its generation.
But also it offsets
offset.
approximately 75% of the town of Penfield's overall electrical usage.
Yeah, I'd look at the raw data that's on the town website. It'll tell you how it's doing, I think.
Okay. I think for the purposes of the comp plan, that's always a hard thing because this is a moment in time.
Yeah, it's a
And that changes
snapshot,
from, day to day. So this is why we sort of talked about it in general terms.
Very good.
Oh, but we could make a reference to the fact that the information is available on the town's website.
Yeah.
I mean, it is pretty cool. You can go there every day and see how much it's,
Right, that's
making, so.
that's a good, to direct people to the website for updates on that.
Yep.
it may lead you to the belief that there may be sunnier climates that it might make more sense. So, like,
Okay.
Transportation?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. I have no major things. I think we need to add a bullet, though, on page 47.
Okay,
One additional thing we can, should, whatever do is we have a nonprofit, a volunteer group here, the Penn Senior Ride Program.
okay,
So I think if we have a bullet point just saying actively support the Penn Senior Ride Program and similar operations or similar,
because I think Lifespan also offers some transportation services.
so if we just say and similar.
Yep.
Yep.
we're
That's
in
a
there.
good addition, thank you.
But Penn's right on the Penfield town website. so-
Okay, wonderful.
And as we know, we're trying to appeal to seniors in this town, so
Yes,
that ought to work. Oh, also, one quick thing, in the paragraph above it,
yep,
where it says 16% increase in the number of residents, over 65 between 2020 and 2017. Presumably, you got that, I think, in one of the appendices in terms of the new data, the 2020 census data or some 2021 data.
Yeah, let me see if we've got better information.
Yeah, I'll take a look. There might be a 2017, 2021 ACS data. The 2020 census, not a lot of the data has been released. Theoretically, it was supposed to be released this month. I don't know. I haven't
We'll
checked
take a look
recently
at
to
it.
see if
Yeah,
that's
I thought
actually
I
the
saw
case.
something in an appendix, but then I was getting a little bleary-eyed, and I wasn't
We'll
really
make sure that
I
if the- yeah.
saw what I thought I saw. But
Yeah.
since we've said we wanted to wait till the 2020 census was done, it really seems like we ought to have a 2020 number in there, so,
Okay, we can take a look at that for sure.
okay, great. Let's see. Of course, that's not the right.
Where are you? What page are you up to?
Oh, I guess we'll go up to page 49. There was one comment, though, on the page 70, which is the proposed actions for the
Okay.
transportation plan. And I think, Carrie, this should be right up your alley. I suggested designing a media campaign targeted to motorists to raise awareness of pedestrian and cyclist safety.
That could be a really great program.
And we could do that in conjunction maybe with a school district even,
Sure.
so that it was designed even with the school district kids, but also that they would help be the promoters, the schools would,
Sure. I think that's a good recommendation.
'Cause we did have-
State DOT might have some promotional materials or educational materials.
They might,
too,
we
but
can also, there's also an opportunity to work with the
Yes.
local school districts, and we've
Yeah.
got several to work with, so that could be a really great program or great idea.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that we can navigate through the Transportation Committee.
Yeah,
That could be a good potential action item
Yep.
or task to take on.
yep. Okay, and Chuck, these are the recommendations that were made for this section of it, this community character design.
So I'll jump to page 51D,
Okay.
only because we're dealing with that kind of now in the preservation board that I'm on with town. They were struggling with coming up with a good way to attract and keep homeowners into get their properties listed, either through the town. And we were trying to kicking around financial aid. I mean, obviously, financial assessment incentive is good. One of the things that we were going to approach the town board with was doing some sort of a tax abatement program for becoming, listing your house in the National Register. I don't know how far we've gotten with that, but
Okay.
I'm wondering if we need there's some historic properties in Penfield that have got a little bit of deferred maintenance, and if, maybe I don't know the exact status of the homeowners, like the mud house is in pretty bad shape. If there was a way that the town could do a local grant type program or tax abatement deal, if you get registered, get your house
Yeah, that's something that,
listed as a action item,
not in here, but maybe as an implementation. I think we can keep it general to say explore incentives, either there are tax rebates available for properties that are on the state and national register. They
there's nothing
qualify.
that the town doesn't offer anything. The town doesn't offer anything for a town historic property.
Right, so we certainly could look at that. I think that they have to look to see what the local law requirements are, if that's something that state town law allows us to do, but certainly something to look
I
at.
think we did look at that, and it came down to the town board had to make that request, but I may be incorrect
Yeah,
on that
and I don't know
assumption,
enough
so.
about it to speak intelligently, so I've tried to learn the lesson
But
that I shouldn't talk then.
I wondered if the preservation board is fairly active. I wonder if just a little blurb identifying that there is one, and we've had a couple of open houses for historic property owners, and there's a training coming up next week on historic preservation that Penfield's actually hosting. I just wondered maybe some note should be given to that.
We can certainly look at that, and to the extent that the Historic Preservation Board isn't mentioned here specifically, we'll add reference to them as well.
Thank you.
And now we're on to civic engagement.
Yep. So a few tweaks, but then on the second page of historic engagement, page 54, C, paragraph C, section C. The title of the section is Promoting Effective Stewardship of Our Natural Resources, but the paragraph largely, again, focuses on the sort of the energy conservation stuff that, not entirely, but largely focuses on sort of, Energy and Environmental Committee and the DPW campus providing 75% of the power, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't focus on, doesn't mention any of the stuff that is in the natural resources sections, which is, woodlots, water courses.
So I think the distinction here is, this is from a civic engagement, this is more of the town's going to continue to be a steward, and this is how it's doing it, not so much the specific recommendations for preserving natural resources. So maybe we need to change the sentence or the strategy. So
we can broaden out the definition or our background on EECC, since their scope now includes doing things like EPOD review and site review for properties that do have EPODs on them. So like I know right now they're taking a look at updating some of our EPOD mapping, our Environmental Protection Overlay District mapping, because it's been a few years since that was last conducted. So maybe we broaden a little bit about what EEC does.
Yeah, I just think you need to kind of fill this section out so it isn't quite so focused on kind of one thing.
Sure, we can definitely add some language in there as well.
Yeah, because if you've already talked about, you have a whole section devoted to natural resources, and then you're not really talking about any of the stuff in that section. It just seems like, we kind of missed the boat there somewhere. So.
Okay, we can look at making some modifications here.
Great.
I'd like to go back to the sustainability thing real quick. I just had some notes that I had taken from the previous version. I was kind of supportive of, as an option to the giant solar farms, groundwater heat pump systems. And I wonder if that could be added as an addition to the solar farms. My logic on that is that once you've got that infrastructure in the ground, it's buried. You can update technology as technology changes with the heat pump part of it, but you've still got that resource buried in the ground, and it's not bothering anybody.
We can probably find a spot to add that in under item B, which is pursue new sustainable technologies and methods.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There have been some communities built in Texas by developers, and they've actually, when they've installed the infrastructure, the roads and stuff for their subdivisions, they've put pipes in for groundwater heat pumps, and then they sell the BTUs. The builder would sell the BTUs or to the residents. So that's a way of getting the money back, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to bury some plastic pipe in the ground while you're putting a road in. And it might be, we were looking at that in the city, and for a cul-de-sac where you're going to have a small area, a cluster of houses, it's not a bad idea. It doesn't have the visual issues with the solar panels. Plus, you've got an opportunity to upgrade the technology. When the solar panels are done, they're a pile of non-recyclable scrap. But if you've got groundwater heat pumps in place, you're always going to have that heat source. And as technology changes with the ways of extracting the heat with the heat pumps, then you're still got that stuff in the ground. So it's going to be much more easier to keep up with the changing technology. It's a little more pricey to put it in, but if you have small cluster developments, it might be an interesting thing to try.
Yeah, we can certainly make mention of that as an example in that section, in section B.
Yeah, and especially since elsewhere in the document we're promoting cluster development.
Yep.
well, in the section we're coming up into, as a matter of fact, we're really promoting cluster development that would tie in nicely.
Right.
And the last comment, these were just random ones, was and maybe it would be under sustainability, but I really think the town needs to look at doing a leaf mulch program. Brighton has a pretty successful one down by the bay where they give away the mulch and the compost, and I think that there's a lot of people that would be for that.
I think they give away mulch here in Penfield.
Drop off.
Hardwood
We do,
mulch.
yeah, we do brush mulching,
Brush
but we don't do leaf pickup or leaf mulching.
And I'm not suggesting.
Pick up, or are you talking about mulch distribution?
No,
I'm
she's
talking about composting, so
Oh,
residents can
composting.
drop off their
Forgive me, okay.
brush, well, we can do brush now, but they won't take leaves or grass clippings, and, and I get it, the fact that there's a lot of people in the newer parts of Penfield that don't have any trees, but there's a lot that have, the older part of Penfield that have tons of trees, and it's a real burden to bag them all up and put them out for the garbage, so they could make a viable leaf mulch product or a hardwood mulch product, and give it away to the residents.
I think if that was talked about, though, one thing, I talked to Eric Tate about that. I don't know if you heard me. I talked to Eric Tate about that, and kind of a context of something we were both really concerned about, and you probably know about this, Chuck, about the jumping worms problem. They've infested the South, and they are really destructive to soil quality, like unbelievable. It turns soil into like coffee grounds. And they're almost impossible to kill. They have like no natural enemies, and they reproduce like wildfire. And Eric was very concerned that with sort of a leaf mulching, something where people were taking stuff out of their yards that could have stuff like that in them, that if the compost doesn't get to a certain temperature, it doesn't kill them and whatever. But anyway, if we did something like that,
I was going to say the heat usually takes care of that, but
it usually does, but sometimes if with our weather, if the compost pile doesn't get to that heat, because I know I compost myself, so if it doesn't get to the right heat, it doesn't kill all the stuff you hope it's going to kill. But we'd need to talk to people like that and other experts. So if it was listed as a recommendation, we would.
Well, I
It's
think
something
if
we
we,
could take a look at.
if we,
I think
in
it would be a
under,
recommendation to explore it.
Yeah,
right, so
yeah,
we
exactly,
can,
to
that
explore.
can be looked at, especially under the reduce, reuse, and recycle
Right.
section. So we can certainly
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
that.
Okay. Are we ready for future land use?
I think so, if you are.
Yippee. Some small tweaks on the first few pages, although I would recommend that somebody double-check all the references to colors on maps, because
That was an item I had noted as
Okay,
we were
yeah.
going through the appendix and
Yeah, 'cause
working
they-
on updating the map. It's had a couple of revisions.
yeah, because
but we're
we've
also
got
trying
dark
to-
green listed for a couple of different,
We've gone through a few
categories.
different color renditions. We're trying
Right,
to
so
make sure
yeah.
that in reproducibility of the document that the colors chosen, one, are easy to identify, but two, that they don't end up like blending together, light green, dark green, because not everybody's printer's the same, or some people are printed about black
Yeah.
and white, and then you end up with a mess. So that's
We
something I've
will,
been working
we will
with,
verify
our
that,
GIS
yeah,
group,
in fact,
our
at one point, we had that highlighted,
right
the
around.
color references highlighted, and then we unhighlighted them for the purposes of producing this draft, but we're going back to them.
This isn't my work laptop from upstairs, but I do have a sticky note on that specifically identifies future land.
yeah, I mean, and one solution, which I know you use elsewhere and stuff, is to just not use colors in certain sections, to use patterns, like mix colors and patterns, so it's a little easier for those of us who need stronger and stronger reading glasses every year to see.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Okay, on page 59, one thing that in the first draft, under high-density residential, the first draft mentioned another place, mentioned Fellows Road, south of 441, as suitable for high-density residential. I didn't see it here.
Fellows Road south of 440.
Oh, because
that was a carryover from 2010 prior to the development of the Arbor Ridge
Oh,
subdivision.
so we're done with that.
Yeah.
So
Okay, got it.
that was
That's why
an area that's
I
been
didn't-
developed
I,
within
like, wasn't
the
parsing
availability of
the
sanitary
address
sewers.
of
Yeah.
that new development. Okay.
Yes, that was a carryover from some previous language in the older comp plan.
And in that same section, do we want to reference somewhere how traffic and possible road redesign fit into sort of high-density residential planning? Because I think it's the first question somebody asks when you say high-density anything is, what's the traffic going to be like?
Sure.
How's it going to affect my commute, my, route to pick up my daughter from ballet, whatever it happens to be?
Yeah, I think that last paragraph would be the place where we put it. Yeah, thank you for that note. That's an important consideration.
Mm-hmm.
At the bottom of page 60, right at that very last sentence, they have a street network that is connectivity and is clear and identifiable. Dead-end streets and cul-de-sacs don't work well in mixed-use areas. When possible, streets should be narrow, include sidewalks, and this is in mixed-use developments, obviously. But in my experience with mixed-use developments in various other parts of the country, they usually have bike paths and/or bike lanes somewhere. Now, if you're going to have a really narrow street, you're not probably going to be able to do a bike lane, but typically they would have separate bike paths, which is, of course, goes to the whole intermodal transportation thing, and it also goes to sustainability, and it, goes to good health for citizens.
We can add a reference to dedicated bike lane and/or bike paths.
Yes.
Or multimodal transportation networks.
Right.
Yeah.
For the high-density residential, could we add a paragraph about traffic?
Yeah, we were
Yes,
noting, we're
we
going to
did
talk
note
Yeah, that
about
was what I was just
transportation
saying.
analysis.
We need to put that in there.
That was something we did. We did add I had a sticky note to revisit that.
Industrial.
Yeah, the answer for industrial is limited
Yeah.
opportunities for,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so page 62, Shadow Pines is the hill I'm willing to die on, just FYI. And I have rewritten what I wrote to you guys a long time ago, 2 pages, one a suggested replacement for page 62, and the other a suggested replacement for the page in Appendix A that references Shadow Pines, and I will hand these out to you. I think this will, I understand why the first draft may not have been so acceptable to some people in the town. But I think this is kind of tight and largely unobjectionable
Thank you.
as a suggested replacement for that page.
so I think, and I appreciate the time and effort, Donna, that you put into this. What I think would be a good maybe approach here would be to provide this to the town board when we submit the draft as an alternative for them to consider. Because I don't feel comfortable as staff making that change in sort of like, direction. And then have the town board and decide if, I'm certainly happy to share this
Yeah.
draft, or we can share it beforehand and see their thoughts about whether we should update the draft that gets published to reflect your changes here. I think for the purposes of future land use, we're looking ahead. Obviously we have to have some context of what happened to get us to the point that we have these additional 200 plus acres of town property. And then it just in general terms describes what got us here, and then the fact that the town has a master plan that it's working off of and through, and the town board is utilizing that as a basis for its current and future decision-making. So I would say I respectfully agree. I appreciate your sort of year-by-year summary of events. I just don't know if this could be something maybe we put in as the appendices, potentially. We can certainly look at that as an option. But again, for the purposes of future land use, this is sort of just trying to provide a snapshot of where we've been and where we are right now and how things might be progressing in the future.
Well, then you could conceivably reverse them and put what I wrote for the appendix here and this for the appendix then.
We can certainly take a,
Let's
take a look at that.
Because that would also do it. This is, and I will very strongly, and this is my show and tell for you guys for tonight, that I brought for you examples of exactly what the Safe Shadow Pines group did to not only raise awareness initially, but to get out the vote to make sure that people turned up for the referendum and voted their conscience in the referendum, which resulted in a 4-to-1 favorable vote in terms of the town buying the land, and that the Shadow Pines people were out ahead of the town on this, actually. Then when the town formed the moratorium committee, which had a much longer name, but it was always called the moratorium committee, they came to the same conclusions the Shadow Pines committee did. And then the Shadow Pines Land Use Advisory Committee also came to the same conclusions after lots of public hearings. So this was, and if you look at just the first paragraph here, I'm trying to tie in a combination of things, that it's forward-thinking land management to buy up a parcel like this for a town, a municipality to buy up a parcel like this. And it also takes a very high level of civic engagement, not just by town-appointed committees, but by citizens who just sort of say, this is the right thing to do. We'll put our own money, our own time, our own effort. I can tell you, because I ordered all of our marketing materials, that we distributed 4,000 pieces of material door to door to people in this town to get everybody to get out to vote for this after raising the issue in the first place. So that it isn't kind of mentioned is pretty, it's more than, it's not like just personally hurtful or something, but I think it misrepresents the level of civic engagement that was involved to build to the ultimate purchase and sort of planning for this facility for, generations to come.
Okay, I hear exactly what you're saying. We will certainly take a look at what you've provided, and we'll figure out where and how to incorporate your comments. I certainly, I appreciate that. I think we're trying to, for the comprehensive plan, balance, just sort of we have the property, and I understand the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it from the organization, the grassroots efforts that maybe brought this issue to the town. But we're not doing that for any other types of, I just want to make sure we're balancing the information that's provided. I think the appendices might be the best place, because in this case, we're in the future land use section. So we're really looking ahead to the future use of that property.
So as I say, flip the 2 pages.
Okay, we'll take a look at that for sure.
Yep.
The first page
we can take a look at that for sure.
Yeah.
Fill in the name of the firm and just said of an outside design firm, because I felt like I referenced it here. So
Okay.
put in BME, put in, fill in names and things. But this gives the basic sort of geographic, topographic information about what it's like. And the second paragraph is kind of where we're going. Flesh the where we're going part out a little bit, and you're there.
Yeah.
And then you've got a very good appendix page.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm wondering on the, I'm not sure it would fall in the Shadow Pines, but maybe some comment that, we did go out to bid for a consultant to do a design. And just from a personal experience, we've got a bunch of Eagle projects in our troop proposed over there, and several of them have been proposed by the Recreation Department to be right in places where they're going to build a new circular driveway for the Clark House. So it doesn't seem like the Recreation Department and the people that are responsible for the parks and stuff are familiar with the plan that BME did. Or they are familiar, and they just want to follow it. But I would hate to see other nonprofits have that same experience. Our troop put in that ultimate Frisbee golf course, and it goes right through an orienteering course. We did the orienteering course, and it goes right through the Frisbee golf course. So it just seems like there's not a lot of coordination. We spent that money to make that plan. It should be on everybody's desk when people are looking for projects to do.
Yeah, so I think,
and it's not.
but part of that could be also, changing priorities and
I agree. I
opportunities.
understand.
So that's the other challenge here, is that over time, direction might change. So I think having to, and that's always a challenge. Anytime, you're doing a project, that involves an area that hasn't been, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but it was a property that was in flux as far as developing the plan and formalizing that, and that took time. So in the meantime,
But it's not in flux
projects
now, right? I mean, the town board approved the
master plan. that's in-
so, and that was a while ago, and this is current projects that are being proposed.
I'll certainly reach out to the Recreation Department to make sure that there's coordination between Recreation Department and the Supervisor's Office, so that there's good communication. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I'm just sharing it, one, it was a personal issue, but also I wonder if we need just a sentence or two in that section about Shadow Pines, that emphasizing the fact that we had a master plan done for that, and the town board approved it, and they had, at this point, they intend to, for all intents and purposes, follow that plan as far as other development there.
Right, so I think that's
Because I think that's going to be your guiding document for the future, unless they decide to
I think
modify it,
there have
so.
been some modifications already to that there's still stuff sort of in flux with that. I mean, in terms of what we know and what some of us have been dealing with even with our state senator's office and stuff. So there's stuff that isn't etched in stone there, Chuck, and I share your concerns about how some of the original things that the public voiced their wishes for did not get reflected in the plan, and that other things that were in the plan then just some took on a life of their own, and so forth.
No, I'm not criticizing the plan at all. It's just, if we've looked at the plan, the town board's happy with it and they adopted it, that's great. But I think we need to have something in there that says, we've got this plan, this is what we're going to, substantially, this is what we're going to do.
okay.
And maybe, is that part of one of the appendixes, or a reference to the fact that we have it?
It's in here. It's in the sheet that's up on this. I don't know if you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at.
Yes, they can see.
Yeah, so that's just like a pullout of a graphic that was in the master, the accepted and adopted report.
Okay.
So, but we can maybe make sure that we look at the language to see if
We've
it's,
even been dealing with it with the Preservation Board, with saving the Clark House. I don't think they were as aware of the plan as they should be, probably myself included, because a lot of the Recovery Act money is going into infrastructure over there, and if they're looking at a substantial addition to the Clark House for a meeting space, that would be the time to run that utilities when they're doing that, all that work at the other end for the parking lot and stuff. So it just seems like the plan exists, the other town departments exist, they're not talking to each other.
They're
Or
definitely.
maybe it's just my perception.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
But-
they are talking to each other, but if that's not coming across, then we may have an opportunity to enhance the communication around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly.
But Don, I appreciate the time and effort on this. We will certainly take a look at this and figure out how and where to incorporate it into the draft.
Great, thank you.
And so then, are we scrolling down? I think,
But we're still in future land use
right, and
and
now,
order to implementation.
we've sort of done the implementation as we went along here, but did we miss any tables that we made some notes along the way because we were going back and forth, but are there any other modifications we should be looking at with the other tables we didn't talk about?
Maybe a couple, but I just would like to go to the page titled Implementation
Oh,
65.
Sure, the introduction.
And something that was in the draft that we saw in March that was not here that I feel, based on the type of work I've done with my life, is that we talked in the other draft about the action items to be, not only appropriate to the policy, but to be measurable. And we don't make any mention here about measurability of going forward, that we will, in fact, we want to make sure that we have metrics going forward, because as we know, for this plan, we have nothing we can really measure against from 2010. I mean, I'm sure we could dive back into data and pull something out, but one of the comments that was made about from moving from the 2010 plan to this plan was, well, where's the side-by-side comparison to show how well we did on these things? Not just quantitatively, but qualitatively, and we don't have that. So I think going forward, we need to incorporate, a commitment to try to measure what we can. And some of it is, a little loose, and we can't measure precisely. But what we can measure, I think we need to try to, impose metrics on.
Okay, I think, in some ways, some of the items, it's either you did it or you didn't do it,
Yeah, oh,
right?
yeah, right.
I think
So-
what we talked about at the committee was maybe the supervisor giving us a report quarterly or annually or whatever on what they've done, sort of as some accountability to the plan. Because I don't know that they've done that in the 2010, but whether it would be a town board meeting or
Or public open meeting.
public forum where they would say, we've done this, this, and this once a year to
It
show
would
where we are.
probably actually, it wouldn't be the town board, it would be town department heads sort of
town staff.
reviewing the comprehensive plan and reporting back on things that were completed, partially completed, initiated. So we can look at, actually, what I would suggest is at the tail end of of these tables, where we have like a note at the very bottom, like all the way at the end, I would move that, and yeah, you might need to.
I think just a couple sentences or a paragraph at the end of chapter 5 in the middle of that page on page 65 saying,
I'm going to suggest we might be putting it here as like at the conclusion of all the tables, we might make a reference to the, tracking accomplishments and identifying ways to,
Measure and report,
yeah.
both.
works for me.
Perfect. Other items or tables, I know we talked about several of these, but if we need to talk about any other tables we didn't talk about.
Yeah, in terms of the ones we didn't talk about on page 66, on the proposed actions for community resources, number 2, I wouldn't limit it to facilitating ongoing studies. I would just add the sentence, develop new studies as needed,
Okay,
because the ongoing studies are good, community outreach is good, but sometimes community outreach leads you to discover that you really need a new study, that your study didn't hit the mark, or it's
Sure.
dated or whatever. Oh, wow, what does this mean? Groups chosen.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who has to decode my own notes.
Oh, I see okay, I see one of the things. Is that on number 6 under community resources? I think you really meant for where it says agency, I think you meant that for to be number 6 under residential living, because you have lifespan and stuff like that. I don't know, or it's in both places or something like that.
Yeah, this,
It's one that I think has been identified in both.
right.
But I think since we're specifically referencing underrepresented groups, and it's a little bit broader than just theoretically just residential, that community resources might be a good
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I think what we might need to do is add a word, encouraged of programs and developments that effectively serve, because I think that's the other missing piece here is we're in community resources, so it's.
I'll add the BRI-PEN.
Well, the thing is 6 and 6 are almost exactly the same.
So
If you read 6 under residential living and number 6 under community resources, you have fundamentally the same language there.
Okay, that might be a copy and paste error.
Yeah.
The encouraged development, this might be, number 6 under community resources was supposed to be a programming recommendation, that's why lifespan is in there.
Yeah.
So that's just a copy and paste error.
Okay, so
We'll fix that, yeah.
And, Mark Valentine isn't here to say anything about this, but I see nothing about sewer maintenance and water and stuff. I think, I don't know if community resources, I think, was it in that section? I don't remember, that we always provide healthy, safety, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I think we can,
I think we repped it in under number 7.
yeah.
Okay,
And number 5 for stormwater practices.
okay.
Or for
All right, yeah,
stormwater
okay, yeah,
storage.
5. It should have been, I think I just
And
wrote
then
it.
number 7 is more looking at our sanitary sewer infrastructure and capital improvement.
Yeah, so we just need to throw that in there.
I
So-
think what we can say is regularly update facility master plans and facilities and infrastructure. We can make a reference to infrastructure in there. This way it
Yep.
captures it.
And a quick one in number 8, I would say cooperate with school districts, nearby municipalities, and community organizations to share resources and information, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
blah,
thank you.
blah.
That's a good change. We tried to identify places where the intermunicipal opportunities avail themselves.
I think the other sections,
We've talked about,
we've
right?
talked about the whatchamajiggers.
Yeah,
The
we have notes on every one of them.
Implementation stuff. There is, I really have to say, I kind of lost my mojo there trying to get through the appendices, but there were and one thing we corrected, which was the fact that in the appendix, it says people make $89,000 here. And
We're fixing
tax.
that.
So we-
Yep.
Yeah, so we got to that one. We got to the Shadow Pines page that I think
Yep.
we should just kind of flip that chart, whatever, into there. But then on the cover of Appendix B, I have a note that there's something.
For the mapping, is it the mapping appendix, I think?
Yes, that is the maps that's the map
Okay.
appendix.
Appendix B. I can't even,
I think we've revised it since that latest draft, so if there's,
what, like, kind of page would that be, page number? Does anybody?
Oh, if you go to the,
I'll grab the one with the appendix.
no,
Oh, found it.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, so basically you wrote the word appendices under.
Oh, it should
but
be
it's
appendix.
Because
Yeah.
there's
It should be
only one of
appendix
them.
B.
Yeah, it should
Yep.
just be
Yes.
appendix.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Yeah. I can catch them when they're in like 48-point bold, but other than that, maybe less so.
Okay.
All right, so I really appreciate your time, your thoughts, your feedback. I say we collectively. I think what we're going to be doing is to the extent that we're going to make some of the changes that we've talked about here, Donna, if you wanted to we can schedule a time to talk offline if you'd like to sit down, or you can just, I'm happy to go scan your copy and have that. We can.
If you can scan it,
I can scan it.
so much the better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
we
you
can
leave
do
it,
that.
if you give it to me, I'll be able to scan it before you leave.
Great,
Yep.
good.
That'd be very helpful for us. And as I mentioned, we're planning on, packaging the draft up for the town board's receipt, and they can start to begin their review. And then and this is not for your benefit, but also for anyone else's benefit, the adoption of a comprehensive plan requires a public hearing, so that would be, the next step is the draft would be put out in the world for the public's review. We would have it available on the website. We would have a hard copy here at the town clerk's office. I would recommend, I like the idea of putting one at the library.
Yeah.
In their resource section. And then we'll set the public hearing. Based on the order of meetings, we're likely looking at a July public hearing date, which is a good amount of time to give the public a chance to review. It also gives the town an opportunity to reach out to stakeholder groups that were involved in the process, and anybody else we think might be interested or want to, provide feedback on the document. So we'll be doing that for sure. And then once the public hearing is conducted, then the town board, will provide the town staff with direction on final changes and edits to make, and then they would proceed with the adoption process from there. We have already started the seeker review. Because this is a comprehensive plan, it is a type 1 action and does require a coordinated review. So we did send out those notifications that the town board seeks lead agency. The only other entity that has a discretionary decision to make with a comprehensive plan is actually the Monroe County Planning and Development Department through the 239M review process. So we send it out to them, and we sent out a notification to anybody else that might be interested or in the town's comprehensive plan, and that was a pretty exhaustive list of state, county, school districts, other agencies, and just so everybody's aware that the town is in the process of updating its plan. So we're going to be, the town board will be navigating the seeker review as well.
Okay, great. One thing I would ask you guys to do, because I know you have nothing else on your plate, is just to run through, given that we've made these recommendations and stuff tonight, if you can look through Appendix D, which is the issues and stuff, and to make sure that somewhere in some recommendation, some implementation, that we have every one of those boxes ticked for if the public has recommended this, you've picked it up in a public meeting, we've hit it somewhere in this comp plan.
Okay.
And, and even just if, for the sake of those of us on the committee, if you could just let us know, what went with what,
Okay.
just so that we kind of have this level of confidence. But I think that is really the icing on the cake, to say, listen, we listened to you, and everything everybody talked about is addressed in one way, shape, or form, or in some cases, multiple implementation strategies.
Okay.
So.
If you want to hand that to me, and I think should we call this meeting adjourned?
Yeah, we'll call the
please.
meeting.
I'll second.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
and then we can.
Stand
yeah,
up
we
and
can
run away.
scan.
This way Brian can know that it's time to end the recording, and we appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully a few viewers will see this and the discussion. And certainly the town board, I'll be sharing the link with them as well.